Are you fired up tonight, everybody? I am happy to announce that thanks to your support, thanks to your doorbelling, to your donations, to your phone banking, to your hard work, I'll be serving as your next governor.
We were thinking about your thoughts and impressions of Governor Ferguson over time. What were your thoughts like during his campaign?
I was incredibly negative and skeptical of him, if I'm being blunt. I mean, you can go look at my Twitter posts. I think a lot of times I disagreed with him on a lot of stuff. And I thought a lot of his attacks on the Republican challenger, on Dave Reichert, were completely unfounded and hypocritical. And I called him out on it, right?
This is Representative Chris Corry, a Republican from Yakima. He's served in the Washington State House since January 2019. His Twitter posts, or X posts rather, about Bob Ferguson last year, they were critical. But honestly, they could have been more extreme. Mostly from time to time, he accused Ferguson of lying.
And I think one of the areas, ironically, we're back to now was he spent so much time on his governor's race focusing on candidate Trump at the time and now President Trump.
God forbid if Donald Trump is our president again. But if that dark day were to come, I feel I'm as qualified as anyone running for a statewide office across the country to know how to deal with the Trump administration, know how to stand up to that Trump administration.
That I was like, Washington's over here, right? Like a lot of our problems have nothing to do with what's going on in D.C. Now, you can argue we have some current problems coming up that may be coming out of budget decisions in D.C., and that's totally fair, and I'm happy to have that conversation. But like our spending problems are a lot of those types of things have nothing to do with what's going on in Washington, D.C. It's in Washington State. So I posted that meme of that guy looking at the girl with the I'm like, well, over here, Washington's over here. Focus on us, please. So I was very critical of him. Now he came in, over time he came in and he gave a really impressive inaugural address.
Our state is unaffordable for many Washingtonians.
And that address, it changed things for Corry.
We rank 50th last per capita in number of law enforcement officers.
Republicans stood up and clapped at Ferguson's address more so than Democrats did, because he was talking about a lot of our ideas. He wanted more money for police. He wanted to get, more houses built and get the government out of the way of the home building.
We must make it easier, faster, and less expensive to build housing of all kinds.
He wanted to right-size the government. He wanted to look at the state budget and fix some of our problems.
Let us work together to ensure that we correct some of the actions that brought us here. But let me start by saying that the era of assuming unrealistic growth in revenue is over.
Those were all Republican ideas, right? And so one of the things that people in general hate about politics and about politicians is that they will be for something until the other side's for it, and then they're against it. And so I was always very clear. If it was my idea before, and if it was a good idea, I was going to, support him in that. And we were very supportive.
Governor Ferguson was honest, and I appreciate that. He opened his speech by talking about all the ways Washington is failing, and many of the areas he identified were the same ones Republicans have been talking about for years. So
you can actually watch our media availability immediately after that.
Our members were turning around, smiling at each other. The Democrats were just sitting there with this stoic scowls on their face nearly the whole time. Republicans probably stood up 8 to 10 times. I texted our floor leader that I can skip leg day today because I've been up and down enough times.
And what we thought we were going to be going into was completely the opposite, right? So we were kind of like, well, we liked a lot of what he just said, so let's do that, right?
Yeah, and I think during that media availability, you were saying something like, wow, I was expecting something I would dislike in that speech, but I couldn't find anything.
I mean, I'm with my colleagues here. I was writing down notes, and I was honestly confused because I was waiting to find something that I would really be upset about. But no, we're here to help, right? These are really good, bold ideas that we've been talking about for a long time.
I don't know if that was necessarily the impetus for a lot of the inter-party challenge between governor and the legislature. My guess would be because he was kind of criticizing the way the Democrats have been running the legislature. And I, obviously, as a Republican, I believe they were justified, right? We've completely overspent in a number of areas instead of focusing on core services. And so that maybe could have led to some of the challenges. But I have to assume he was sincere in those beliefs, right? Nobody stands up and criticizes their own party if they don't believe those things.
This is Northwest Reports. I'm Sara Bernard. It's still early days for Washington's new governor, Bob Ferguson, the first new governor the state has had in 12 years. But Ferguson is anything but a newcomer. He's been a steady force in local and state politics for decades, most recently serving as Washington's Attorney General. Like many who hold statewide office, he's always been a Democrat. And so, in such a reliably blue state, he was widely seen as the heir apparent to former Democratic Governor Jay Inslee.
And so now comes the question, who will replace him? And the answer is becoming clearer now after Attorney General Bob Ferguson threw his name into the ring.
In part because of all of this, many people had specific ideas about who they thought a Governor Ferguson would be. And that inauguration speech that Representative Corry just talked about, it surprised a lot of people. And it was the first of many things that surprised or confused people during the governor's first 6 months in office. Cascade PBS state politics reporter Laurel Demkovich was one of many who started noticing this surprise and confusion early on. And it was coming from all sides: Republican lawmakers, Democratic lawmakers, lobbyists, journalists, even voters. And frankly, there was plenty of frustration and disappointment, too, both in and outside the Capitol. In the latest Cascade PBS Elway poll, for instance, which we'll get into later in the series, Governor Ferguson's approval rating for the first 6 months was the lowest of any governor ever in the poll's 32-year history. In this series, which we're calling Ferguson versus Everyone, we'll dig a little into why that might be. In episodes 1 and 2, we'll ask lawmakers and pollster Stuart Elway about the forces at work here, the specific expectations that so many in the governor's orbit had of him and his office, and the rocky road to a state budget compromise, including the largest tax increase in Washington's history. In episode 3, we'll talk to journalists about the lack of clarity and public communication coming from the governor, and how that impacts everyone across the state. Of course, we've asked the governor to talk to us for this series too, but so far, he hasn't. All right. For episode 1, we're going to focus on the experience of Republicans in the legislature. For that, let's go back to Representative Corry.
And we are recording. You did hit record.
We are recording, yeah.
Okay. So name's Chris Corry. I'm a state representative from the 15th Legislative District, which is Yakima and Benton County. So I have most of Yakima County and then a sliver. I go down into Prosser in central Washington. I'm the deputy leader for the House Republican Caucus, and this is my 4th term. So I've been there 7 years. Nice. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Okay, good.
That sounds good.
And I'm a Leo.
Ooh, a whole other line of questioning we didn't even think about. Corry says he didn't expect to have a career in politics, and maybe for good reason.
I jokingly tell people I hit my head, but I do think there's a level of insanity that you have to have in order to want to be there and then thrive there.
He says he only decided to get involved when his local representative retired, and members of the Crime Stoppers board that he was on urged him to run.
I wasn't, the well-known person in town, but I just knocked on a lot of doors, talked to a lot of people, and made it through and ended up just falling in love with it. Not for any of the reasons I thought I would, but for just the ability to understand how the system works and then to be able to hopefully make changes. Obviously, it's a little different in the minority, right? I don't get to set the agenda. Oftentimes, I'm playing defense, but the amount of influence that I can have just based on working with people and having good relationships across the aisle has been very impressive to me. And the other thing I really like that I didn't realize that I could get to do is the amount of work I get to help people with like my constituents when it comes to interacting with state government.
So Representative Corry is a Republican in a state legislature where Republicans are most often in the minority. Like he said, he often finds himself on defense, even in emails.
I have a lot of people that assume a lot about me based on being a Republican. Actually, matter of fact, I got an email yesterday from somebody saying that I was evil because I was a Republican, and I sent them an email back and said, would love to get to know you. Like I actually, and I'm genuine, I would be happy to talk with you so you can get to know who I am as a person. And then maybe, like if I'm evil after that, then fine, like that's your opinion of me. But like don't assume based on my political party.
Anyway, because Corry has only been in the legislature for one other governor before this one, and that governor was also a Democrat, Cascade PBS state politics reporter Laurel Demkovich and I wanted to know what it was like for Republican lawmakers to work with Governor Inslee. Here's Laurel.
How would you describe, the relationship that you and your Republican colleagues in the legislature had with Governor Inslee?
So we didn't have a relationship with Governor Inslee. It was very hands-off. And, I think if you spoke to some of my other colleagues, they would echo that opinion. Governor Inslee was incredibly hands-off with us. He would give his, state of the state. He would have his legislative and budget agenda, and then his staff would do everything else. And he would show up once or twice throughout session. And I didn't know any different. I would hear stories of Governor Gregoire who would be on the floor or on the wings of the House and Senate talking to members, pulling people into their office, really trying to tackle issues. Inslee wasn't an issue person. He had his ideas, and he wasn't there to hammer out the details on them. And I think that was a stark contrast from when Governor Ferguson came in, because he was a lot more hands-on. He was a lot more detail-oriented. He actually knew the underlying policy in a lot of these areas. And he spent time with us. He would come to our leadership meetings. He actually had regular recurring meetings with my leadership. And obviously, throughout this conversation, we'll note stark contrast in a lot of areas. Like he was engaged. So he generally knew what was going on. So
it's worth noting here that hosting regular meetings with Republican leaders is pretty unusual for Washington's Democratic governors.
And I'm going to give him credit for that, right? I think that there was a lot more conversation both directly with him as well as his top leadership. And as far as I know, I don't think we ever canceled or we were ever canceled on because somebody was mad at us. That had happened in the past where somebody said something somebody didn't like, and so we just wouldn't talk for a while. I know. The more time you spend there, the more time you realize that you never leave junior high. It just gets more expensive and a lot more money is at stake. But the food theoretically gets better. Governor Inslee may disagree with me, but the impression that we always got was that it was his way or the highway, and that, when it came time to hammer out stuff, if it wasn't you're supporting my bill, you're against me. Governor Ferguson, from the beginning, he was out meeting with our members even before he was sworn in.
For Republican legislators, Ferguson's effort to cross the aisle like this was a very pleasant surprise at first.
What were your thoughts kind of hearing him put such a big emphasis on working with folks on both sides?
It was refreshing to hear that. We were optimistic and hopeful that we were going to be able to do a lot of good things together, right? The state is not, it's blue by the election results. When you actually look at the subset of people, I think it tends to be a little more purple. It's not a 80-20 or 70-30 Republican-Democrat state. It's probably more of like on the whole, 60-40, maybe 55-45. And so my idea is let's move a little to the center. Let's focus on, areas that we can agree on, like what has made Washington so successful. Let's work on those things. Let's not upset the apple cart. And so anybody that's willing to work on that.
Well, Governor-elect Bob Ferguson is making some news even before he takes office. He's proposing across-the-board cuts in state services instead of new taxes.
We heard repeatedly throughout the start of session and first couple months that the governor kept pushing back on a lot of the progressive ideas.
Given our budget realities, this is not the time for major investments in any program, no matter how worthwhile.
Particularly the wealth tax and even, some of their final tax proposals. What was kind of going through your head as you're seeing him push back on some of these proposals and, hearing that maybe he wasn't going to raise a bunch of taxes?
I was hopeful. That was one of the initial things we stood up and clapped for was fixing a bunch of stuff, right? He promised a couple things that we've been complaining about were budget gimmicks, right? Bow wave spending, where you would basically start a program, do a phase in and then put a bunch of the spending down in a later year so that you could do more now and then deal with it later. Well, guess what? Later eventually shows up. And this session was the FAFO part. Like we were on the FO part of the budget process. And if you're listening at home, look it up if you don't know what that is. And those outbound spending comes back to bite you. And so we were promised we weren't going to do any of that.
Moreover, I will veto policy bills that defer major spending obligations more than 4 years after the legislation is adopted.
There are a lot of details here that we're skipping over. But long story short, if you're in Washington, you probably heard about this. There was a giant deficit in the state budget, in the ballpark of $12 billion. And the legislative session this year was full of debate over what to do about that.
The budget shortfall went anywhere from 6 on the conservative side from some of our nonpartisan staff to 16 on the more generous, side from some of my colleagues.
Well, by now, you've likely heard Washington State is facing a multi-billion-dollar budget deficit. Some Democrats say a wealth tax could be the funding solution.
And so to that end, my Democrat colleagues proposed a variety of what they were calling progressive taxes, right? A very untested wealth tax. And I give credit to Ferguson. He basically said this is not something that we can just rely on, that will be challenged. How do you, tax unrealized wealth, and not have it violate the state constitution?
So at first, like Laurel was saying, the governor appeared to push back on the ideas of his party.
We cannot adopt a budget with anywhere near the level of taxes currently proposed by the House and Senate.
Cut state spending before you add new taxes, he said, especially a tax on the state's wealthiest. But then...
So if you could add a sound to this podcast, it would be that Price is Right is Wrong sound. Bum, bum, ba-dum, because it started off so hopeful and then it just went out of the way.
Because then came the second surprise. By the end of the legislative session this year, the governor did ultimately sign off on most of the Democrats' proposals.
Governor Ferguson signed their operated budget for the next 2 years, including billions of dollars in new taxes.
There's no wealth tax, but Ferguson had only minor vetoes to the plan he was handed.
Fully acknowledged in a lengthy press conference what he had said earlier in the year, that the state could not tax its way out of this budget mess. But he and lawmakers will do exactly that with $9 billion in new taxes.
Republican lawmakers, so hopeful at the start of session, were pretty disappointed by the end. Representative Corry, who thinks the state is really more purple than it is blue, wishes the governor would have done more to reflect that.
I obviously am not on the other side. I can tell you my thought was he did not empower the moderates in the Democrat majorities to be on his side and to partner with Republicans. And we were very clear, both in the House and Senate, on areas where we agree, we will partner with you to get these things done, including on budgets. We actually proposed budgets in both chambers that would not have raised taxes. And we said, here's how you can do it. And we even offered, we'll stay out of the way. If you need Democrats to run all this, we'll just stay silent and vote for it. If that's what you politically needs, because that's what's best for the state of Washington. Because there's enough moderates and I'll speak just to the House because I don't know the dynamics in the Senate as well. But there's enough moderates in the House Democrat caucus that we could actually do a lot more of what Ferguson and what we want to do. But they are, I think in my opinion, they're scared. I think a lot of them are railroaded, either into silent submission. And there's a lot of tactics that go on in the background that are kind of gross and ugly in order to foster compliance. And so the idea is, in order to get there, we could have gotten there with Governor Ferguson if those members had been empowered to make those decisions. And, unfortunately it didn't happen, but I'm hopeful that, it was his first term or his first session. He's going to learn. We go back. We all do. And maybe we can do better next time.
When did you start to feel like Governor Ferguson might, sign off on what he ultimately signed off on? And were you feeling kind of worried or surprised at the end of session? Was it not until he signed the budget 3 weeks later?
I felt like, the die had been cast probably 2/3 of the way through. I I'm forever an optimist. So I was like, oh, there's hope. Like, we can do it this way. It's like, when I'm watching the Huskies play and they're down, I'm like, all they need to do is get this, and that, and then we're back. So that's kind of where I was thinking, all right, maybe he's going to do the right thing. Maybe we can get a veto. Maybe he'll call us back into session for a special session to address some of these things. Didn't plan on it, but was hoping for it. So I would say I tried to remain as optimistic as long as I possibly could.
Yeah, we saw this interview that you had done with KIMA in Yakima, and you said, I think the governor talked a really big game and then did the exact opposite.
He said on his first day in office, he was here to reform government, and it turns out he's just here to grow government.
Yeah, I was pretty disappointed. I mean, I am. And again, I try to call balls and strikes, right? So I try to give credit where credit's due. I'd be fair in every interview where I thought, he did good. But at the end, it was like Democrats got everything that they wanted, and a lot of that was just the opposite of what he had cast vision on in his inaugural address. And so,
still, Corry says there were some good things that came out of the governor's dialogue with Republicans.
I think that did lead to something positive in this relationship, which was fixing some of the ag fuel exemptions in the Climate Commitment Act. This was something he committed to Representative Dent, who's out of Moses Lake, and worked with him. And we got that done this year, which was good. And I'm not sure that would have happened under the previous administration.
And he's still got hope, even now, that the governor wouldn't have stood up at that inaugural address and criticized his own party if he didn't believe some of those things.
Playing Monday morning quarterback here, maybe he didn't understand his power enough as the executive to, the bully pulpit, the ability to rally people around these things and to really push for these changes, even if it meant kind of bucking his own party leadership in the House and Senate. I am one of those lawmakers where if he comes back and says, here's what we want to do this year, if it's a good idea, I'm still going to support it. Let's figure out how we can get it done. But I need him to back his beliefs and stand up and fight for them. Actually be in there, be in the mix. I would love to go back to that point where, and he said, I'm not here to defend government. I'm here to reform it. Like, let's get back to that. And I think, you'll garner a lot of support from a lot of people across Washington. But people right now are really frustrated.
So in a blue state, where ultimately Governor Ferguson ended up siding with Democratic lawmakers, he may have frustrated the Republicans. But those Democrats in the legislature and Democratic voters, they're probably feeling pretty good, right? Wrong. Very wrong.
He, in some ways, probably managed to piss everyone off, right? Because Democrats are still feeling stung that he wasn't as lefty as they expected he was going to be.
That's coming up in episode 2 of Ferguson versus Everyone. Thanks for listening to the first episode of Ferguson versus Everyone. Be sure to check out the next 2 episodes, which are available right now wherever you get your podcasts. You can also read Laurel Demkovich's written story on this topic at cascadepbs.org. This episode of Northwest Reports was reported by Laurel Demkovich and produced by me, Sara Bernard. The story editor was Ryan Famuliner. Our executive producer is Sarah Menzies. Our production manager is Adam Brown. Thanks to Resti Bakal and Eric Msumanje for their help in the studio. You can subscribe to Northwest Reports wherever you listen, and whatever platform you're listening on, please review us. We'd love to know what you think of the show. Northwest Reports is made possible by listeners like you. Your support will tell the stories that shape Washington State. Join the members who help us create Northwest Reports. Your donation will be put to work right away, delivering the Cascade PBS lineup of podcasts, video docuseries, and daily in-depth reporting that you and so many rely on. In addition to supporting our journalism, members receive great member benefits, including Cascade PBS Passport, with extended access to an on-demand library of local and PBS favorites. Go to cascadepbs.org/NW Reports to sign up today. For the latest political, investigative, and cultural coverage from the Pacific Northwest, visit cascadepbs.org. That's also where you'll find Ferguson versus Everyone. I'm Sara Bernard. We'll be back soon with another episode.